Well, here we are at the top of the hour. This is LeiLani Cauthen, your host, the CEO and publisher of Learning Counsel News Media and Research. We're going to be sharing a bit of our research today as we get into this conversation. We've already had people pre this event ask us what we meant by deepening equity issues. So we're going to tell you what we mean by that. But the topic of the hour is solutions to deepening equity issues in the teacher shortage. And we know that the teacher shortage is very, very serious. I'm going to show you some data in a minute about how deep that well goes right now. We're very concerned about it as Learning Counsel. We're getting calls from all over the country saying, this is going to be a problem really big time in the fall. What are the solutions? What are you looking at as a research institute for the avenues that we could take? And at least one district even called me while I was standing at our Boise, Idaho event and said basically they had they're looking like 70 kids a class come fall, which is not acceptable, of course, to them or anyone else. So let's get started here. So I have with us today Jose Viana, Dr. Jose A. Viana, Senior Education Advisor from Lexia. Hello, so good to meet you. I'm going to have you share screen here in a second. And then Wendee Evering, who's the assistant administrator from A.C.Moore Elementary in Columbia, South Carolina, who we're really glad to have. She's mobile right now, so she's not sharing screen, which is fine because we'll be able to hear her anyway. But what we're going to do today is get into this conversation by first setting a backdrop of what is Lexia doing to start address this issue. And then we'll get into the issue a little bit. And then we're going to do some back and forth questions of everybody and sort of keep it moving as we go through. So Jose, why don't you go ahead and share screen, give us a little overview so that we have this backdrop of knowledge that you're going to share with us. Go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity. Just want to confirm, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Lexia Learning is all about literacy. We have two programs and a professional development that's focused on literacy and the science of reading. But recently, we have developed a program that specifically focuses on the needs of our English learners, our multilingual learners, our emergent bilingual students. And I want to share a few screens, make it real quick, just a little taste of what this program provides for our emergent bilingual students. So it's an adaptive blended learning program. So the teacher's at the center of the program. It's not just the kids sit and click. It supports students' English language development, and it does it through academic conversations. So content focus, whether it's science, math, social studies. And the focus is on speaking, listening, and grammar. So although we're a literacy company, this is not a program where we adjusted a literacy program to make it fit the needs of emergent bilingual students. We actually built it from the ground up and focused on speaking, listening, and grammar. What's really great about the program is the students get to interact with 17 different characters. So we're very culturally responsive. You can see these characters come from all different backgrounds. As a matter of fact, 13 different languages are represented. And when you speak to the characters, you can even pick up on where they're from because they'll speak with a slight accent. The whole idea is for the student to kind of see themselves, right, mirrored in these other students that look and sound like them and have experiences like them. What's really cool is that not only are they having conversations that are content specific and academic, but you get to know a little bit about the characters as well. This is Juan, for example. You can see he has a pod on his belt because he has type 1 diabetes. So he talks a little bit about that. He also talks about his family that originated from Mexico. He was born here though. So, a lot of little tidbits that students can relate to and connect with. I'm going to click so you can kind of hear him talk about his abuelita.
Hi, my name is Juan. My abuelita, my grandma, learned how to make fresh tortillas when she was a little girl living in Mexico. Now that she lives in the United States, she still makes them for the family every weekend. Next weekend, she will teach me how to make them too.
So the whole idea is as the students are having conversations like with Juan, they feel like they're in a safe environment to talk freely because, again, they're talking to someone that kind of looks like them and sounds like them. And speaking about having conversations. The students on this program are engaged because they're speaking for 70% of the time. And if you think about, I know when I was teaching ESOL many years ago, it was very hard to provide the opportunities to have conversation. And it's really what our students need the most in order to acquire English as their language, second language. And these academic conversations also come with these language frames. So we pull out the grammar that they're learning, and that way the students can have these language frames to support their conversation, in this case that they would be having with Juan, and be able to speak freely and have these types of conversations. And then Juan would also provide corrective feedback live with the student. So if the student struggles a little bit answering this question, what's unique about Mexico, Juan, with technology that we have, would be able to correct them and help them and give them explicit instruction on their errors. One of the really neat things is that we aligned with proficiency standards throughout the nation. So whether it's New York ESL, California ELD, Texas ELPS, WIDA, ELPA 21, not just aligned, but we built the program from the ground up. We use these language proficiency standards as a foundation. This is WIDA, for example, and the alignment that we did to the different standards, as well as the can-do statements. And last but not least, the data that gets produced from this program is really exceptional. You don't have to wait for that yearly access test, for example, to know how your students are progressing. You can see this is a student shot. So you have district, classroom, and student-specific data reports. So here you can see the student Khalid, for example, started off as an emerging student because our program levels, there's 19 levels, are aligned to whatever language proficiency standards are in your state. So in this case, he started on level 4, he's on level 14, so he's at about an expanding level. If we drop down, you can see the different activities. So using verbs with abshir, which is one of our characters, for example, you can see how Khalid performed in the speaking, listening, and grammar portions of these activities that he has done with our characters. You can see the different encounters. And there's also a presentation score, which is almost like a summative assessment at the end of each encounter that they'll have with the characters. If they score anything less than an 80%, they get an activity that the teacher can pull them, and they get a scripted lesson that the teacher can do one-on-one or in groups. So that was just a quick overview of how Lexia English is really an exceptional approach to meeting the needs of your emergent bilingual students and giving them a voice.
That was excellent, and that sort of gives us a clue what we're talking about when we're talking about deepening equity issues. So I want to give one data point, and then I'll give several others, and we'll get into this conversation. And that is, we do have in America a lot of emerging bilinguals. It was 4 years ago that Salt Lake City, Utah district told me they service 187 languages. So this is real across America, and our ability to respond to it really requires that you have things like what you're talking about, where you've built in the language sort of nuances of the way a student, should be sort of receiving the initial instruction, so that they can bridge over and actually understand their peers and be interested in what's happening in the lessons and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Dr. Viana. Anything else you want to say there?
No, you nailed it. One of the things that I appreciate about this program and just in general is that opportunity to speak, right? And it's such a challenge to provide that. And if there's one thing the pandemic showed us, especially while the students were remote and in a hybrid situation, was that learning English, right, is social interaction. So this ability to speak and listen is just crucial to develop that oral ability.
Yeah. And I will say, as a software developer, just looking at what your developers went through to do the analytics, that's not a simple task. And the time savings for the individual teachers are huge. So that's one of the levels of the deepening equity issue. And I want to get into more. But let's bring back Wendee into the conversation. So let's talk about kind of your opinion initially on this deepening equity issue. And then I want to, like I said, show some data from Learning Council research. So Wendee, why don't you go ahead? I'm going to move screen here so everybody knows who's on the line right now. There's Wendee, there's Jose, there's LeiLani. Wendee, what's your initial points you want to make about deepening equity issues?
I have had this experience with the teachers at my school where we have had the challenge of being able to find the time to develop lessons and experiences that are culturally responsive or relevant. And we have found that Lexia has provided the opportunity for the students to receive that immediate feedback. We do love the reports that we're able to print. The teachers are able to use those reports to provide information to our MTSS team. That's our team that provides support to students who are having learning difficulties. They're also able to partner with the parents to support the students. So we have found that online, this program to be very helpful and effective within our elementary school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to dig into that a little bit more and have both you say something about this, and that is the fact that what you're saying is that it's a time saver. So yes, so that going back to normal that we're hearing talked about by a lot of schools, I sort of want to call it backsliding a little bit.
Yeah,
like we had technology come out like yay, but if you were backsliding, you didn't grasp the fact that it's not digitizing.
Yes,
you should be using digital, which is what Jose just shared with us, which is the true majesty of what you can get a software program to do. Whereas if you're just trying to toggle back to just doing everything manually, you're going to miss the nuance that he just shared with us, which kids kind of need. So any other comments about those nuances of accents and things like that? Okay, go ahead.
I believe it's helpful. I think it helps the students within the classroom feel comfortable speaking. We have had experiences where some of our students will choose not to respond because they are, self-conscious about what the other students will think or how they'll respond. But at times when they are made or they feel comfortable when they hear others who sound like them, they are a little more apt to participate and join in the conversation.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that. That is huge. I remember being even a teenager, right? Everything was self-conscious, nervous about everything. Everybody's going to think about me. That's huge. I didn't really think about that, but that is really huge. Dr. Viana, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point, Wendee. And I agree. I was an English learner myself. We immigrated from Cuba to Florida. And I remember just being that timid, quiet boy. You see that a lot with our newcomers. They have that silent period where they're scared to say anything because, of the heavy accent and hard to, understand them. Right. Well, this program, it puts the student at ease. It's like, oh my goodness, he kind of looks like me, sounds like me, so I can give it a shot. And what's great about the technology behind it, the science recognition, the speech recognition technology, is that it picks up on accents as well. So it focuses on what you're saying, not how you're saying it. And one thing that I always think about, because I lived in Florida for a few years, lived in North Carolina for a few years. Now I'm in the DC area. And it's like, what's the English accent, right? Because the folks that I met in North Carolina speak a little different from the ones, that I'll meet when I go to New York or Boston or Texas. So it's a universal language, and you can be speaking to someone from India, and they'll have their slight accent, but grammatically and everything else, they're speaking perfectly. So I think we embraced that, that asset model of education. We think, the students come with so much more that the focus shouldn't be on how they're saying it, but what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Good points. Really good points. Okay, so let me share some data like I've been promising to do. On the screen, you're going to see the results of some research the Learning Council did recently, talking about where the teacher deficit is going to become fall of 2022. So right now, the supply of teachers really coming out of teaching colleges is only about 70,000 a year, and the United States is going to need 1 million. So we're at a 930,000 in need, which really means, and we have another article coming out soon, breaking it down by size, by number of students, typical number of teachers, how many you're going to need. So if you used to need to get 20% of what you already had for teachers in new teachers every year, start thinking closer to 35% is what you're going to need, anywhere between 28 and 35%, depending on where you are. Now, certain areas of the country are a little bit different. They're not having as much of a problem, but I do know that California is trying to poach directly out of Texas. So they go and try to poach their teachers. And then in terms of how teachers are doing, so this is other levels of this deepening equity conversation, the issues, right? Is that teachers are overwhelmed. Like our surveys keep showing the same data, which 74% saying they're overwhelmed or burnt out. Part of that is just the shift, right? So a lot more digital. Maybe they're backsliding a little bit, but they know they need to maintain enough digital because they need to be data driven. And that's the drive towards let's personalize learning, which Lexia, what you just showed us, and this is why this is sort of a benchmark for us to think with, is that the heavy work that you would need to do if you had maybe 20 different languages in your one classroom is there's some heavy lift being done by software for you. And that's what we should want from software. We should want software to do some of our work. We shouldn't want software to just be a plethora of different tools that we have to do all the work in, right? So that's a major point about equity. And then the other thing that we found happening is that teachers spend too much time on these 3 tasks. This was amazing to us, and I think it's going to be amazing to you, is we asked them, how much time do you spend finding your digital lesson materials? How much time do you spend building digital content and doing all the lesson sequencing, step 1, step 2, step 3? And then finally, how much is your digital traffic? So digital traffic is defined at the bottom there. That's the back and forth, right? Like emailing it out, posting it out, then getting pelted with questions. Where's my login? My mom said I'm not supposed to do this lesson. Or my parents calling you at 7 p.m. saying I can't find it online. What folder do you put it in? Checking all your notifications, checking the dashboards, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of work. So we had teachers say, or 24% of teachers say they spend over 30 hours a week just doing that. So let me ask you this. Are they having any time to teach? Because this is probably a lot of overtime, right?
Yeah.
When they're teaching. So those are equity issues. And the reason this is a really big equity issue in this conversation today is because if you're spending so much time doing this minutia, you're definitely not personalizing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you might say you are, but really what you're doing is you're triaging for the kids that you can help make it through. Those other kids with those really heavy accents you barely understand anyway, you might just sort of let them go and they're going to get an F. That's not okay when software could do this kind of work for you. And so the issue that we're talking about here is one of the equity issues, is the issue of all these languages, the massive change moving to digital, and not leaning on digital to do some of the work for you. Only looking at it as like, oh, tech is just a tool. Well, yeah, but it should do some work otherwise. So that's what we're talking about here. So I'm going to bring it back to you, Wendee, to talk about that issue right there, of the workload of teachers as an equity issue that could be addressed.
Well, I will say that is truly a major issue within our school that we are attempting to address by providing more time for planning during the school day so that they're not spending those hours, after school or at home, because that really impacts teacher satisfaction. They are not able to enjoy life because they feel that they are always working from home. So, with that being said, we are trying to provide professional development to help them understand how they can use blended learning to organize some of the data. As we're saying here, technology can be our best friend if we truly know how to use it. And it takes time for them to learn all of the different features. Because as I stated earlier, we use Lexia within our building, but some of our teachers are not maximizing the benefits. They're not learning which reports will provide the best information as their progress monitoring. They're not allowing the program to truly personalize the learning, So there are tons of benefits here in this program, but if we don't find a way within the school to provide the professional development and the time for them to dig into the program and to truly learn all of the benefits that it provides student and actually allows them to even have from the comforts of their home. I mean, there are so many features, and it just takes time for us to share them and allow them to use them and to use them to a point of feeling comfortable using them daily.
Yeah, and I think there's so many layers to discuss about what you just said, but I can see that Dr. Viana is just like bouncing on his heels over there. So go ahead.
I think I'm going to take Wendee on a road show with me when I go visit all these districts, because it's exactly what she's saying. And obviously, when we designed this program, we didn't want it to supplant what teachers are doing in the classroom. This is definitely a program that's supporting the work that they're doing, and the teacher is supposed to be in the center of this whole process. And speaking of centers, that's the idea, is to have a classroom with different workstations, right? And one of those workstations would be this program. And it's almost, I hate to say this, but it's almost like having another teacher, a paraprofessional there, right? Because these characters are engaging in conversations with the students, and the students are having these conversations. So the teacher can then have their small group activity, have a peer-to-peer workstation somewhere else. And, we're talking about teacher shortages, and this is one way to kind of divide and conquer, right? Having these different work groups happening in your classroom, so you can have those small opportunities with the students. One thing, and this goes back to when I used to teach emergent bilingual students, is it's really challenging to have the opportunity to provide purposeful repetition and corrective feedback and just have conversations when you have a class of 25, 30 students that are learning English. So this does provide that support for the teacher to be able to focus on a small group while the program is engaging students in these conversations and all levels of conversations. So whether they're a newcomer from learning shapes all the way to your long-term English learners and those students that need that extra grammar support and can have like higher level conversations. And as Wendee mentioned, the data that is provided, it's a click away. So the teacher will have formative assessment, as I pointed out when I showed Khalid's screen. You can see the listening, speaking, and grammar performance and the skills. But you also have a summative assessment with a short quiz that they take at the end of an encounter with with the character. So all this information, all this data is there for the teacher to be able to support students. And of course, those offline activities as well that are scripted where you can bring students together in a group and have a focused lesson. I mean, you can't beat that, and it's something I wish I had when I was teaching my students.
I think it really is, though. Like, we've had many superintendents tell us as we're on the road, it's a culture shift for the teacher. And actually, one superintendent said that she feels like what's happening right now with teaching is there's a bit of an ongoing identity crisis. So you give somebody this glorious software that does the dispensing of the information, the articulation around that individual student of exactly what it is that they need. It's kind of a freak out moment because you're used to being a very linear minded, keep everybody on the same pace. Everybody gets the same exact thing for many, many years. As a teacher, this was you're like a shepherd of all these kids moving along the same way. And so to let them all like go many different directions all the time is like what it's a little, it's like having, a crazy party at your house. So Wendee, talk to me about that a little bit more, because I think that when we talk about deepening equity issues, we're living in a world where there is inequity, right? And we know it. And our school system and how teachers were taught has been built, they were built to try to normalize. The whole system is trying to normalize you based on your pace. But now we're telling them something else. Do you feel like there's that bit of a crisis going on? What do you think?
I agree. And we are now encouraging teachers to differentiate. It's like, no, we can't teach to the middle because we're not going to reach everyone. So as you're saying, we are stressing the importance of benchmarking, starting at a starting point, identifying where the students are, and daily collecting data with your formative assessments. And then we are, encouraging them to also have those summative assessments. My principal and I, we're often, noticing certain grade levels do a better job of that than others. Some of them are also better at differentiating than others. And so as we're stating here, if we or the teachers learn how the Lexia provides that, and you're not having to go crunch those numbers yourself or grade those papers or find the time to grade those papers and to give immediate feedback, you're able to feel like you're doing a really good job if you would just allow the program Lexia to help you. Because I think at times we feel we're cheating, when we allow the program to allow us to provide that data, that daily formative assessment, rather than, using an exit slip that you would then have to look at and organize the data and then find a way to respond and share the responses with the students and the parents. So if we learn or teach our teachers how to use the systems and all of its features, I think it would free up a lot of their time. I've fallen in love with the program, and it's sometimes hard to get the teachers to really fully understand it to where they can see the true benefits. I often tell parents, and I felt this way as a parent, that it's like having a tutor in your pocket, because they're able to just be the program's so very responsive. And it's just beautiful. And it wasn't there when I started teaching myself. But, when I left the classroom, I was just starting to be able to use certain features and use technology to help me in this way.
I like the way you said that. And I want to comment on a million things, but again, I want to come back to you, Jose. So, this is acknowledged real. There is an identity issue, and it starts with the training and understanding, and maybe also selectively retiring old ways. Not doing those slips Wendee was talking about and doing everything manually. That's hard. It's like I gotta unlearn, not just learn this new stuff. I gotta unlearn, and I gotta be told I have to get rid of some of those stuff. What are you seeing, Jose, in this whole issue?
Well, it's interesting, and I think back to when I was teaching. You get the students at the beginning of the year, you know how they performed on their language proficiency assessment. And then in my case, I would group the students accordingly. And I thought that was differentiated instruction. And I would even laminate the poster board with their names on it. And they were kind of stuck in those groups for the rest of the school year. And to me, that was differentiated instruction, right? And I would wait for the end, like around February or March, where they take their language proficiency exam. And maybe there were some shifts and I do another list and laminate it. But what happened to all those months in between, right? One of the features that I love about this program is that that's totally gone. The data that they're getting, it's live, and you can differentiate the instruction according to the student's needs. The program even groups the students for you. So it'll say, these 3 students struggled on this activity, pronouns, whatever it could be. And you can bring them in, you get the actual scripted lesson. You can bring in this group that struggled on this specific issue and work with them. Sometimes individually, sometimes in groups, depending on what the program is, what the data is giving you through the program. So it really highlights differentiated instruction and pulling students together, which is, that's one less thing a teacher has to worry about is, which ones are struggling with what. You have it a click away, and you can pull them all together accordingly. No more laminated, group classroom lists, right? So that's one of the many features, but one that I think aligns with exactly what Wendee's saying, and one of the old ways of doing things versus how we really should be reacting to the students' needs.
Yeah, and you just highlighted a whole thing about what the definition of teaching is now. Like you're pulling this one student aside because it shows on the dashboard, or pulling these 3 aside and just really working with them, right, to help them get that. That's really what teachers want to be doing. I don't think they ever wanted, maybe some of them do, wanted to stand up and lecture all day long. Like they really want to teach.
Yes.
Yeah. So Wendee, what is your comments about that? Because I've dug deep into this identity issue. What else do you want to say about that?
Well, I will say that is true. It is a true shift. I experienced it as a teacher in that when I first started teaching, I felt I needed to control my entire group. And if I wasn't doing a whole group lesson and ensuring that every eye was on me and every ear was listening, then I wasn't teaching. But I had to learn how to train my students to work independently. And to trust that if I trained them well, that they could move from the centers around the room and do what they were expected to do, and have a way to ensure that they know, a system of allowing them to record what they're learning and track what they're learning. But, with Lexia, it also allows you, as you're going from station to station, the record's there, it shows exactly what they're doing. So it allowed me, the online tools will allow me to still have some level of control and a way of monitoring what my students were doing when they were away from me. So it's just a true shift in mindset. And I know for me, the expectation when it comes to differentiation within our classrooms now is that the groups are fluid. But in order to ensure that the groups are fluid and students are moving constantly and aren't stuck in one place, that takes time. And as we said, as we started here, teachers are feeling like they don't have that time, because if it's taking 30 hours to do all of those things we referenced at the beginning of our session here, it's like, where do we get all the time needed to do things the old way? So it does require us to take things off of our plates and replace them with new, better, more responsive tools.
Yeah, and that's intensive. Like this is emotionally intensive. It's almost like I'm seeing PD rooms where people are going through like their moments of like listing all their stuff and then crossing things off and then emotionally crying over it, right? Like, okay, I'm going to give that up. I'm going to give it up now. But I also got images of like, the ninja roving illuminator of knowledge, right?
Yes.
Rather than like this guide on, professor dude at the front of the room, blah, blah, blah. And I don't like the word guide as much either, because guide is sort of like, you went on a hike. I like illuminator. That's my new word.
Yes.
And I love the ninja image you just gave me, Wendee, where you're like the ninja leader of learning and you're like running around the room and like, like ninja this, right? This needs to be, I love it. So Jose, what is your comments on this too? Because you've taught in the classroom as well.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and I mean, Wendee covered kind of, I'm taking more notes than actually speaking, I think, because she's right on. And one of the things that stands out to me is, we talk about the domains of language acquisition. So, reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And I can't emphasize this enough, that listening and speaking piece is what is usually missing in classrooms. And I blame myself. My classroom was the same, right? As Wendee mentioned, you're kind of in the front of the class and you want to make sure that they are, acquiring this knowledge and that you're giving them what you think they need. When in reality, what they need to be doing is engaging in conversations, right? And having opportunities to speak. Because in order to read, you read in the English language, you need to be able to speak it and listen to it and understand it. So that oral piece is so crucial and so challenging for teachers to implement in their classrooms. So that's really the only thing I can think of that we can add, that I can add to what Wendee was sharing, but how crucial that is, and that's what's great about this program. It really focuses on that opportunity to speak and have almost like a little discussion with these characters that look and sound like the students, and kind of gives them that confidence and encourages them to give it a try and to engage in these conversations.
Yeah, I love this. And we're talking like this and we're saying, it could be so great and everything else. But then here's what everyone asks, right? So we got to talk about this part now, which is, okay, so this is all really good, but where's the evidence that it works and the utility of using these software supports, blah, blah, blah. Because when you go talk to the procurement people or the higher ups, this is the first thing they smack you with, right? Well, how do we know it works? Well, first of all, this is what I say. Have you been in the software? Did you see it? Do you have any grandkids? Do you have any grandkids? Can we kick because really, I can give you data all day long about how fabulous it is in terms of moving the ball forward of learning. But I really tell leaders in education, I'm sorry, if you haven't logged in and experienced it yourself, you do not know what you're talking about. And you need to live it. So that's my first step. But let's talk about this issue. So Wendee, what is your thoughts on the utility of it, the efficacy of it? Is it working?
Well, our district is committed to using it. We have requirements. We are requiring our teachers to provide opportunities for them to use the programs either within the classroom or at home. So you all have already convinced us that this works and the data shows that it's very, very helpful. So we're not having to make that case as far as telling or convincing our leadership that this is effective. Okay. But like you said, for those who have never used it, it just takes one chance or just going in and allowing a child to experience the characters, experience the opportunities to have these conversations and to interact with the learning, and then you're sold. And then, as I stated earlier, we are monitoring this progress in our meetings as with our teachers and administrators. They are monitoring the progress on weekly basis and sharing it with parents. So as they're monitoring that, looking at those data points,
they are seeing that the students are learning, growing, and moving. So it's truly just taking the time to progress monitor and analyze that data.
Yeah, and if you do it in that way, you're sort of evangelizing as you go, right?
Mhm.
Like it's spreading of its own.
Yes.
Yeah, it was just super awesome. Okay, Dr. Viana.
I mean, the only thing I could think of adding, and this is something for your members to take into account when it comes to any program. Everyone says they're research based, right? And it's
Right.
really easy to say we developed this program and it's research based. We pulled from research, but that evidence based and that efficacy is always something, when you're looking into programs and potentially implementing programs, what's the efficacy like? What was it like in a district similar to mine with a diverse population like mine? Like asking those types of questions. And, not to brag, but Lexia has a huge research department, and that's all they focus on is looking at the programs, how they're being implemented, what are the outcomes. We had a lot of great research coming out of the pandemic because that was, everyone was curious, what were the gaps and were students still progressing? Were there, what was the efficacy and those types of questions. So to be able to pull studies of actual districts and their implementation and how things are going is something that companies out there need to be providing for customers and potential customers, so that then you can, like you said, you can evangelize to the teachers. Look what's happening in this district. It can happen here if you just click the on button and make sure your students are using the program with fidelity. And that's important also. That's exactly what Wendee is talking about, is implementing with fidelity is crucial. Not just sitting them on the computer and forgetting about it, but there's actual teacher involvement in the program where it'll tell the teacher, it'll flag the teacher, hey, we've done everything we could. My character has given explicit instruction, but the student is still struggling a little. Please pull them to the side, pull up this lesson and work with them individually or like we mentioned in a group. So that fidelity piece is important as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a good friend, Senator Howard Stevenson. He's now retired from the Senate in Utah, who got so enthusiastic about implementation of professional grade software like Lexia that he authored a law that is now in Utah, essentially for use more pro grade software and use it with fidelity. And he used to take around a good friend of his that was a teacher, and she had been given a class of all these kids that were all at different levels, which is really the post-pandemic world, because some kids curled up in a ball, lost all their learning for 2 solid years, and other kids went way ahead. And now we're dealing with this really wide inequity where essentially like some kids are way behind and others are ahead, right? So use it with fidelity, put them in the right place, in the right software, at the right time, kind of thing. Wendee, let's talk about that level a little bit more, right? Which is essentially, the level of inequity we're dealing with right now is probably the worst we've ever seen.
Yes, that is true. And with that, as you were saying earlier, teacher efficacy is very important. And with that, if they don't feel comfortable or fully understand the programs or the systems that they're using, that impacts their ability to be effective. And if they don't fully understand it, it's difficult for them to implement something with fidelity. So that all takes us back to that professional development. And as you were saying, with the gap and with the children who, our children who have parents who are unable to speak English at home, they were unable to support them, but not because they didn't want to. They just didn't have the resources necessary. So yes, as they've come back into the schools, we are noticing that we have children who are coming with huge deficits. So it makes it so much more important for us to implement the systems that we're using and the programs that we're using with true fidelity. And the only way to do that is to ensure that the teachers are receiving the support they need and the time they need to fully understand what they are to do and how they are to do it, So.
Yeah, it's a tough time because they do have to get in there and understand it and use it. And it's a lot. Like, there's still some features and functions of the software I use I don't get, right? So It's been years. Like I've had years to learn it, but I don't. So, it's a thing, right? We're in a moment. We're in a perfect storm moment, and at least we can be a little bit cheerful about it. All right. So Jose, your comments on this same area, because we're kind of circling this thing about equity and being able to use things with efficacy and blah, 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 blah. But it's such a big conversation, and it's deep on a human level.
Yeah. And usually when I'm not talking product, I'm talking equity and always reminding folks out there, especially our content teachers, those teachers that the students are in their class, but they're not having to focus on English language acquisition, letting them understand that, they're in your class and they're learning, whatever, science, vocabulary words you're teaching, but at the same time, they're also trying to learn the English language. So it's kind of like a little reminder that we need to always let them know, right, that they're all our students, and that we need them involved as well. Wendee talks about professional development, and I wish there were more and more, of those content teachers, whether you're teaching math, PE, whatever, that also pick up on some of these skills that are needed for English language development. I know I did my studies in Florida, for example, and in Florida we have a diverse community, lots of emergent bilingual students, and we could say that nationally now, but we had to have credentialing in English language development, no matter what you were studying in education. You could be studying social studies or history or whatever, and you had to add those extra courses to learn how to apply that content to English language development. So I guess what I'm trying to say, just emphasizing what Wendee's saying is that professional development piece is important, and it's important for all those that are interacting with our emergent bilingual students.
Yeah, I love that. I love that comment. Well, this has been really awesome. I think what I want to make sure we do is open it up for any questions from our audience. That if they want to ask anything, they can. Like, what do we mean by deepening equity issues? I think we sort of described all of them. Did we miss any one of the? We talked about lost learning. Mm-hmm. We talked about the language difference in learning that has to do with accents and the cultural appeals that you can build. As a teacher, if you're from a certain culture, you're going to automatically have more appeal to kids of that culture than other cultures. And you can't change your skin every day when you walk in. So that's a given that you might want to have software do that for you. Also, this wide scale of where kids are coming out of the pandemic. They weren't kept in a normal pattern at all. It kind of went splat all over everywhere, right?
Yes.
This need to retire old habits is part of the deepening equity issue, because in the same school, you could get a different teacher than the other kids got, and that teacher is still in the old universe, and the other teachers in the new one, and those kids are doing better. And we get it, right? These are all deepening equity issues. So equity is right here, right now on this event being defined in a broader way. So ask questions, people, about what you're thinking about all this, even questions about how do you appeal to teachers to really let go of old things and embrace new things? How do you appeal to administrators? I've already written down that I need to write an article of just log in, please, to put out to our, so that more leaders actually do that and they experience it for themselves, because I think that that's really huge. So I don't see any questions coming in, but I'm going to make sure I actually looked in the right place. chat and Q&A. But do you guys have any questions for Learning Counsel, or should we ask Jose or Wendee more questions, us to each other? Jose, why don't you go ahead?
Actually, I think a question just
Yeah.
came in. At least it flashed across my screen. See.
Okay.
Let me see.
Okay, from Eric Brooks. Okay. Do you want to answer that, Jose?
Let me see if I can pull it up. How do we get our education?
Yes. How do we get our educational community to focus on the acceleration of learning? That's a good one, because that's another inequity. Sounds like your product is wonderful. How will it help our students accelerate their learning?
Yeah, and that can be a whole session on its own. Again, just making sure that you're being culturally responsive, as we talked about, which the program does. Focusing on that oral piece first is crucial. You need to speak a language and understand the language before you implement it in anything else, literacy or whatever. And I mean, just all the different features and things are available. But I think the main thing is that giving them the opportunity to speak. And in the program, they're speaking for 70% of the time. And I'm sure you've seen kids on programs and just kind of mindlessly clicking through things, and they lose that engagement piece. When you're speaking like we're doing now, you have to be engaged, right? You can't. And this is one of those programs where you're having a conversation, so it's kind of hard not to be engaged. And that engagement piece, we miss out on it. And Wendee, I'm sure, can speak to that. She probably sees it sometimes in certain classrooms, or as they're moving from one thing to another, and kind of losing that engagement sometimes is crucial. But I mean, there's so much to this, but I think those are a couple of things that I can point out. Yeah,
Wendee, what are your tips and tricks on accelerating it?
I agree, keeping the students, engaged and speaking, and it will truly, keep them learning. And also, as you monitor that progress and you give that immediate feedback, you're able to accelerate learning because you're always pushing them to the next level. So, when you are accelerating that learning, you're not the old way of assessing them, doing that benchmark, doing that assessment, and then keeping them where they are. You're not really, you're moving them, but you're not moving them at their pace. So some kids could move faster, but they're held back. But with this type of program where the program responds to the student and gives them that immediate feedback, so when they're ready to move, they move to the next activity. You're not stuck with waiting for the teacher to say, okay, let me find that next center or that next game or that next lesson. They're automatically moved, which accelerates that learning because they don't have to wait on a person to make the adjustment. The computer makes the adjustment. And then if the reports are then also analyzed, then if that child needs one-on-one with the teacher, then Lexia also provides that scripted instruction that will support that teacher in providing exactly what the student needs. So that's something that I've had to work with my teachers on, helping them see that Lexia gives you what you need to support the teacher. Because as a teacher, when I would find that my students didn't know something when I was a new teacher, it was like, well, how do I meet that need exactly? But the beauty of Lexia is that it doesn't leave you wondering, how do I teach that? It shows you and it gives you the script that gives you the words to use to help them understand that next skill. So it's just been beautiful using it and helping teachers better understand how to use it.
Yeah, I love the way you said that, because really, we're not living in a homogeneous society anymore, and acknowledging first and foremost that kids are all at different places. And we have many, many cultures in the typical classroom right now.
Yes.
So the one to many thing itself is in question. It has been even before the pandemic.
Yes.
It doesn't work, and we know it doesn't work. So So everything that you just said about accelerate, that's a beautiful thing. I really didn't think about the fact that there's an automaticity in the software that allows kids to go forward, because, you know, most teachers, when the pandemic started, that hadn't already been in an environment where there was one-to-one computers for every kid and all that other stuff, they just got thrown in. They went all in on documents. Let's distribute documents. We scanned in worksheets, which I call digitizing. It's not digital. It's not pro-grade digital like we're talking about with Lexia. It's digitized, and it's more work, and it's really not, you know, anyway. So yeah, the automaticness of it. Okay, so final comments, Jose.
Oh goodness. Just you know, I really appreciate this conversation. I mean, there's so much that we can pull from this. I like how you tied it all together on deepening equity issues, and sure, there's a lot more out there that we can consider. But overall, just you know, really proud to be a part of this company, and I came because of this specific product, because I really felt that it was an opportunity to level out the playing field, and making sure that our English learners and emergent bilingual students have, you know, that support, and that their voices are being heard, and that they're speaking in class and learning to acquire this you know, this language that would hopefully eventually make them multilingual learners and be able to be successful in school and beyond. So yeah, just really excited about this opportunity, and thank you for highlighting how our program aligns to meeting these equity needs.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us. Learning Council loves to do these kinds of events where we're openly discussing kind of like what's happening. And Wendee, thank you.
Thank you.
You were awesome, and I'm really glad that you're seeing the gains, and you're applying this, and you're winning. I'm happy with that. That's awesome. And Jose, thank you so much again. Thanks everyone for being with us. I don't see any last minute questions, so I'm going to release you back into the wild. Go forth, flourish and prosper. Do great with professional grade software for all of your students. Thank you, Jose, and thank you so much, Wendee. See you again.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.